The whole office made fun of the disabled janitor, but when the millionaire owner found out, what he did left everyone shocked. And the morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Riverside Tower as Nathan Foster limped toward the elevator, clutching an important stack of financial reports. At 25, his pronounced limp and the occasional need for a cane hadn't diminished his determination to prove himself, even as a janitor. Just another day, he whispered to himself, remembering his grandmother Margaret's morning prayer for strength. His leg was hurting more than usual today, the pain a constant reminder of the car accident that had claimed his parents' lives 17 years ago. The elevator doors opened to the 15th floor, where Patricia Reynolds and her clique of corporate elites held court. Nathan's heart rate quickened as he spotted them gathered near the coffee station, their designer suits and perfectly coiffed hair a stark contrast to his modest janitor's uniform. "Well, if it isn't our limping friend," Patricia's voice dripped with mockery. At 45, she wore her position as administrative manager like armor, using it to belittle those she deemed beneath her. "Those quarterly reports better be perfectly arranged, or Mr. Harrison won't be pleased." Nathan nodded respectfully, trying to maintain his dignity as he carefully made his way past their group. What he didn't notice was Patricia deliberately spilling her coffee on the freshly waxed floor, right in his path. Time seemed to slow down as Nathan's bad leg hit the slick surface. The reports flew everywhere as he crashed hard onto the marble floor. Laughter erupted around him as papers scattered like autumn leaves. "Oh my God, someone's filming this," one voice squealed with delight. "This is definitely going in the group chat," another added. Patricia stood over him, her perfectly manicured hand covering a smirk. "Really, Nathan, you should be more careful. These reports are worth more than your yearly salary." Nathan's face burned with humiliation as he saw phones pointed at him, recording his struggle to stand. His leg throbbed, and he could feel tears threatening to form, but he refused to let them fall. A young woman named Sarah Johnson broke away from the group, kneeling to help gather the scattered papers. "This isn't right," she whispered, but not quite loud enough to challenge Patricia's authority. "Don't help him, Sarah," Patricia snapped. "He needs to learn responsibility for his actions." From the end of the hallway, an unassuming man in a gray suit watched the scene unfold. Nobody paid attention to Robert Harrison III, the building's billionaire owner, in his carefully crafted disguise as a mere consultant. His hand tightened around his own cane, a reminder of his Vietnam War injury, as he witnessed the cruel display. Nathan finally managed to stand, his legs screaming in protest. With as much dignity as he could muster, he began collecting the reports, painfully aware of the continuing snickers and whispers around him. "I expect these properly reorganized and on my desk within the hour," Patricia announced loudly. "And clean up this coffee mess. It's your job, after all." As the group dispersed, Nathan caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window. His grandmother's words from that morning echoed in his mind. "Hold your head high, Nathan. Your worth isn't measured by how you walk, but by how you carry yourself through life's storms." Unknown to Nathan, across town in a modest apartment, his grandmother Margaret sat in her worn armchair, fighting back waves of pain as she battled cancer, unable to afford proper treatment on their limited income. She closed her eyes and prayed for her grandson's strength, just as she had done every morning since taking him in after the accident. Back in the office, Nathan's hands trembled slightly as he mopped up the spilled coffee. Patricia's voice carried from around the corner, where she was showing the video to other employees. "Watch this again. He went down like a ton of bricks." More laughter echoed through the hallway as Nathan fought back tears, unaware that the quiet man in the gray suit was still watching, his face darkening with each passing moment. Robert Harrison III had seen enough, and a plan was already forming in his mind. A plan that would change everything at Riverside Tower. That evening, Nathan knelt in the quiet sanctuary of First Baptist Church, his hands clasped in prayer. The empty church had become his refuge after difficult days at work. "Lord, give me strength," he whispered, his voice echoing softly. "Not for me, but for Grandma Margaret." His mind drifted to the morning's humiliation, the laughter still ringing in his ears. The notification sound from his phone interrupted his thoughts. Another message in the Limping 15th WhatsApp group had been shared with him by Sarah. His hands shook as he saw the video of his fall, now circulating with mocking comments. A gentle hand touched his shoulder. Pastor Mike Anderson had quietly approached. "Something troubling you, son?" Nathan wiped his eyes quickly. "Just thinking about Grandma Margaret, Pastor. The doctors say her cancer treatments need to start soon, but we can't afford them on my salary." His thoughts traveled back to 1975, when Margaret Foster had arrived in America with just $20 in her pocket. Through sheer determination, she'd built Foster's Corner Store, a small neighborhood grocery that became the heart of their community. "She gave up everything for me," Nathan said softly. After the accident, the memories of that rainy night 17 years ago came rushing back. The screeching tires, the shattering glass, the sirens. 8-year-old Nathan had survived with a permanently damaged leg, but his parents hadn't made it. Margaret had sold her beloved store the very next day to become his full-time caregiver. "Your grandmother is the strongest person I know," Pastor Mike said, "and she raised you to be just as strong." Nathan pulled out his college textbook from his worn backpack. He had a crucial business administration exam the next day, but studying was difficult with his mind full of worries. His scholarship covered most costs, but each semester was a struggle. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah. "Nathan, be careful tomorrow. Patricia found out about your college classes. She's planning something." Nathan's stomach tightened. He'd kept his education secret from most coworkers, studying during lunch breaks and attending night classes. How had Patricia discovered this? Another message popped up, a photo of him studying in the break room, shared in the office group chat with mocking comments about the janitor who thinks he can be a businessman. The church door opened, and Mrs. Chen from his grandmother's old neighborhood entered. "Nathan, I just visited your grandmother. She's trying to hide how much pain she's in." Nathan's heart sank. Margaret had always put on a brave face, especially for him. This morning, she'd insisted on making his breakfast despite barely being able to stand. "She needs those treatments," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "The whole neighborhood is praying for her." Nathan looked down at his textbook, then at the mocking messages on his phone. He had to succeed, not just for himself, but for the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him. Standing slowly, he gathered his things. "Thank you, Pastor Mike. I should head home to check on Grandma." As he limped down the church steps, Sarah sent another message. "Patricia's calling a staff meeting tomorrow morning. She looks too happy about it. Please be prepared." Nathan straightened his shoulders, remembering Margaret's words from his childhood. "In America, anyone can rise above their circumstances. That's why I came here. That's why we never give up." He had no idea that across town, Patricia Reynolds was composing an email to senior management about the liability risk of having a disabled janitor handling important documents. Nor did he know that the quiet consultant who'd witnessed his fall was already making calls that would change everything. For now, Nathan had an exam to study for and a grandmother to care for. Tomorrow's troubles would have to wait, even as the group chat continued to buzz with new messages mocking his dreams of a better life. Robert Harrison III sat in his temporary office on the 4th floor, reviewing old military photographs. One particular image made him pause, a group of soldiers in Vietnam, including himself and a young man named James Foster. Nathan's father. "Sir?" his secretary interrupted his thoughts. "I found those personnel files you requested." Harrison nodded, his mind still in 1970. He'd served alongside James Foster in the 173rd Airborne Brigade. The same mortar blast that had taken his leg had been weathered by James, who dragged him to safety under heavy fire. Now, watching James's son being tormented in his own building made his blood boil. Harrison adjusted his prosthetic leg beneath his consultant disguise and opened the personnel files. A knock at the door startled him. Patricia Reynolds entered without waiting for a response. "Mr. Thompson," she said, using his cover name. "I didn't expect to find you here so early. Reviewing personnel files?" Harrison calmly closed the folder. "Just familiarizing myself with the staff structure." Patricia's eyes narrowed at the files on his desk. "Those look like archived records, from quite a while ago." "Standard procedure for my audit," Harrison replied evenly. "Interesting. I wasn't aware consultants had access to historical records. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes, especially military records. Harrison's phone buzzed, a message from Michael Barnes, a former employee who'd been fired by Patricia 6 months ago. I have evidence of what really happened to those missing funds. Will that be all, Miss Reynolds? Harrison asked. Patricia lingered by his desk. You know, you remind me of someone, I just can't quite place it. After she left, Harrison received another urgent message. Nathan had missed morning cleanup duties. He was taking a crucial exam at his college. Meanwhile, Patricia had called an emergency meeting about maintenance staff reliability issues. Harrison opened his laptop, accessing the building's security footage. The recordings showed Patricia's systematic harassment of Nathan, but something else caught his eye. She was doctoring financial reports, small discrepancies that added up to significant amounts. His phone rang. It was the hospital where he'd recovered after Vietnam. The nurse who'd helped him through months of rehabilitation had been Margaret Foster, Nathan's grandmother. The same woman now fighting cancer without proper medical care. Mr. Harrison? His secretary interrupted again. There's a Mr. Barnes here to see you, and Miss Reynolds is asking IT about accessing your computer files. Harrison stood, leaning on his cane. Time was running out. Patricia was getting suspicious, and he needed to act before she could cause more damage. In the main office, Nathan had finally arrived, still in his exam clothes, rushing to complete his morning tasks. Patricia stood watching him with crossed arms. Late again, Foster? And dressed like that? She smirked. You know, I had no idea our janitors were pursuing higher education, though pursuing might be generous, given your limitations. Nathan kept working, trying to ignore her taunts. His exam had gone well, but now he had to make up for lost time. Oh, and the quarterly reports you dropped yesterday? Several pages were missing when they reached the executive floor. Care to explain? Nathan's head snapped up. He'd checked those reports 3 times after reorganizing them. I've submitted a formal complaint about your negligence, Patricia announced. We'll discuss it in tomorrow's staff meeting. From his office, Harrison watched the exchange on security cameras. Next to him, Michael Barnes was sharing documents proving Patricia's history of discrimination at other companies. She forced me out when I threatened to expose her financial misconduct, Michael explained. But I kept copies of everything. Harrison's phone lit up with a message from the hospital. Margaret Foster's old employee records confirmed she'd been his nurse in 1970. The pieces were falling into place. Looking at James Foster's photo once more, Harrison made his decision. The company's annual party was in 2 days. It was time to end Patricia's reign of terror and fulfill a 50-year-old debt to the Foster family. But Patricia was already one step ahead. In her office, she was piecing together the mysterious consultant's true identity, and she wasn't going down without a fight. Patricia Reynolds stormed through the office, waving a piece of paper. Look what I found in the copy room, she announced to her group. Our janitor's college transcript. He thinks he can become a business executive. The transcript had fallen from Nathan's bag during his rush to make up for lost time after his exam. His straight A's only fueled Patricia's anger. He's on scholarship, she continued, pacing, one that requires maintaining perfect attendance. Shame if someone reported his frequent tardiness to the college administration. Sarah, sitting at her desk nearby, tensed. She'd been secretly recording Patricia's conversations on her phone for weeks. Miss Reynolds, called out Tom from accounting, maybe we should focus on our actual work instead? Patricia turned sharply. You're right, Tom. And speaking of work, I need Nathan to clean the storage room, the same time as his evening class. Down in the maintenance office, Nathan received the order. His hands shook as he read the email. Missing tonight's class would destroy his perfect attendance record. His phone rang. It was the hospital. Mr. Foster, your grandmother had a severe pain episode. She's asking for you. Nathan's world spun. His class, his grandmother, his job, everything was falling apart. Upstairs, Harrison watched through security cameras as Patricia entered the financial records room with a USB drive. She didn't notice the newly installed camera, catching her changing numbers in the system. Sir, his secretary whispered, Ms. Reynolds is calling the college's scholarship office. Harrison gripped his cane tighter. He'd seen too many good people destroyed by Patricia's schemes. Just last year, she'd forced out 3 employees who'd questioned her methods. Nathan stood in the hallway, torn between responsibilities. Suddenly, Pastor Mike called. "Nathan, the church raised some money for your grandmother's treatment. It's not much, but..." Tears welled in Nathan's eyes. "Pastor, I don't know what to do. If I lose this scholarship, trust in God's plan," Pastor Mike replied. "And check your email. The church board wants to help." Patricia's voice cut through the hallway. "Still on personal calls during work hours, Foster?" Nathan quickly hung up. Patricia approached, holding his transcript. "Such ambitious dreams for a janitor," she smirked. "Though I notice you're scheduled to clean the storage room during your class tonight. Priorities, Nathan. Priorities." From around the corner, Sarah recorded everything, her hand shaking with anger. In his office, Harrison received an urgent message from Michael Barnes. "Patricia's deleting files. She knows something's up." Harrison dialed his lawyer. "How soon can we move on this?" "The annual party's our best chance," the lawyer replied, "but we need more evidence." Nathan's phone buzzed again. The hospital. Margaret's condition had worsened. She needed immediate treatment they couldn't afford. "Please," Nathan begged Patricia. "I can clean the storage room after my class." "Company policies exist for a reason," she replied coldly. "Or should I inform your scholarship board about your work ethic?" Sarah couldn't stay quiet anymore. "This is wrong." Patricia turned slowly. "Excuse me? He's working hard to improve himself. Why are you trying to destroy that?" The office fell silent. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Sarah, dear, let's discuss your future with the company in my office." As they walked away, Nathan slumped against the wall. His grandmother needed him. His scholarship hung by a thread, and now Sarah might lose her job for defending him. Harrison watched it all unfold on his monitors. Beside him lay the old photo of James Foster saving his life in Vietnam. "Not your son," he whispered. "I won't let them destroy your son." But Patricia was already implementing her next move. In her office, after threatening Sarah with termination, she drafted emails to the college, the building's security, and senior management. She would eliminate this threat to her authority, no matter the cost. Nathan, meanwhile, had to make an impossible choice: attend his class or stay with his grandmother in the hospital. Either way, Patricia would win. The church's fundraising email remained unopened in his inbox, a small ray of hope on the darkest of days. Patricia stared at her computer screen, her face pale. The search results were undeniable. Robert Harrison III and the mysterious consultant, Mr. Thompson, were the same person. She'd found an old business magazine featuring Harrison's photo. "Get me everything on Harrison," she barked into her phone. "And I mean everything." Down the hall, Sarah was copying Patricia's incriminating emails to a USB drive when footsteps approached. She quickly pocketed the drive and pretended to organize files. "Sarah," Patricia's voice was dangerously sweet. "Gather everyone from the 15th floor. Now." Within minutes, Patricia's inner circle assembled in the conference room. "Our jobs are at risk," Patricia announced. "That consultant? He's Harrison himself. If anyone has been recording or documenting our activities, destroy everything. Now." Murmurs filled the room. Patricia raised her voice. "Anyone who talks loses their job. I have enough dirt on each of you to ensure you'll never work in this city again." Meanwhile, Nathan sat in his night class, his phone silenced but screen lighting up with hospital messages. He'd chosen to attend class, trusting his neighbor Mrs. Chen to stay with Margaret. "Perfect score on the midterm, Mr. Foster," his professor announced, handing back the exam. "Your analysis of corporate ethics was exceptional." Back at Riverside Tower, Michael Barnes showed Harrison more documents. Patricia's been running the scheme at 3 different companies, always targeting vulnerable employees, always skimming funds. Harrison's phone buzzed. His investigator had found Patricia's previous victims: a disabled accountant forced to resign, a pregnant secretary fired for performance issues, a veteran with PTSD pushed out after questioning missing funds. "Sir," his secretary interrupted, "Patricia's calling an emergency staff meeting for tomorrow, and she's accessing your real personnel file." In the conference room, Patricia was rallying her troops. "If anyone asks, Nathan's work has been substandard. We all noticed missing documents, late cleanings, inappropriate behavior. Understand?" Sarah's hand clenched around the USB drive in her pocket. Beside her, Tom from accounting looked sick. "This is wrong," Tom whispered. "It's survival," Patricia snapped. "Sign these statements, or I'll reveal who helped me alter those quarterly reports." Across town, Nathan received another text. "Mrs. Chen, Margaret's asking for you. The pain is worse." He grabbed his bag to leave class early, but his professor stopped him. "Nathan, a corporate recruiter called about you, asked if you'd ever falsified attendance records." Nathan's heart sank. Patricia was moving fast. In his temporary office, Harrison reviewed the security footage Sarah had secretly provided. Patricia entering restricted areas. Patricia deleting files. Patricia threatening employees. "The USB drive," his secretary said urgently. "The one with all the evidence. It's missing from your desk." Harrison looked up sharply. In the security feed, he saw Patricia's assistant slipping into his office during lunch. Nathan finally reached the hospital, exhausted. Margaret lay sleeping, her face drawn with pain. "The church collected $3,000, Pastor Mike said softly, standing beside him. "It's not enough for the full treatment, but God bless them," Nathan whispered, holding his grandmother's hand. His phone buzzed, an email from the scholarship board requesting an urgent meeting about his professional conduct. In the Riverside Tower parking lot, Tom from accounting made a decision. He dialed Harrison's office. "This has to stop," he said. "I'll testify about everything Patricia's done." But Patricia had planned for betrayal. In her office, she drafted emails to the board about Tom's mental health issues and recent erratic behavior. Sarah, hidden in the copy room, forwarded every damning email to her private account. Her hands shook as she typed a message to Harrison. "She's destroying evidence right now." The annual party was tomorrow night. Harrison had to move fast, but the missing USB drive contained their strongest evidence. Nathan left the hospital late, limping more than usual with fatigue. Tomorrow he'd have to clean up after the party, if he still had a job. In her office, Patricia smiled at her computer screen. She'd found Harrison's weakness, a controversial military decision in Vietnam that had never been fully investigated. "Check and mate," she whispered, drafting one final email. But she didn't notice the small camera Harrison had installed in the ceiling tiles, recording her every move. The stage was set for tomorrow's party, a night that would change everything at Riverside Tower. The morning of the annual party, Nathan stood in the hospital corridor, his heart heavy. Margaret's doctor delivered the news. She needed emergency surgery. "Without immediate treatment, the cancer will spread," the doctor explained. "The church donation helps, but we're still looking at significant costs." Nathan gripped his cane tighter. How long does she have? Days to decide, weeks at most. At Riverside Tower, party preparations were in full swing. Patricia sipped her morning coffee, watching employees decorate the main hall. "Everything must be perfect tonight," she announced. "Especially the champagne. I want everyone relaxed." Sarah overheard Patricia talking on her phone. Once Harrison's military scandal breaks, he'll be too busy saving his reputation to worry about a janitor. In his temporary office, Harrison received an anonymous email threatening to expose his Vietnam incident. He didn't need to guess who sent it. "Sir," his secretary entered urgently. "We found the missing USB drive. It was copied before being returned." Harrison's phone rang. It was Nathan's professor. "Mr. Harrison, someone's trying to falsify Nathan's attendance records. Keep them intact," Harrison ordered. "Whatever happens." The elevator opened, and Nathan limped in, still in his hospital clothes. Patricia immediately approached. "You're late again, Foster, and not even in uniform." "My grandmother," Nathan started. "Save your excuses. Just don't ruin the party tonight. Even you can manage that, right?" In the break room, Sarah overheard Patricia's group planning. "Once he's serving drinks, we'll implement the plan," Patricia smiled. "He'll never work in this city again." Sarah pressed record on her phone, her hands shaking. Tom from accounting approached Harrison's office, carrying documents. "These prove Patricia's been embezzling funds for years." "Good man," Harrison said. "Stay strong for a few more hours." But Patricia had seen them talking. Within minutes, HR received an urgent email about Tom's unstable behavior. Nathan called Pastor Mike from the maintenance room. "The doctor says she needs surgery now. I don't know what to do." "Keep faith, son. God works in mysterious ways." Patricia's voice cut through. "Foster, The champagne glasses need polishing, all 500 of them. Nathan's phone buzzed, another scholarship warning. His perfect GPA wouldn't matter if Patricia succeeded. Harrison watched the security feeds, his jaw tight. In Vietnam, James Foster had saved his life without hesitation. Now his son needed saving. The catering staff arrived, setting up for the party. Patricia inspected everything, particularly the area where Nathan would serve drinks. "Make sure he's assigned to the main room," she instructed the event coordinator, "where everyone can see him." Sarah sent Harrison a warning. They're planning something during the champagne service. In the hospital, Margaret opened her eyes briefly. "Nathan, are you there?" Mrs. Chen held her hand. "He's working, Margaret. He'll come soon." Patricia gathered her loyal employees. "Tonight, we end this threat to our positions. Harrison can't protect him once the videos go viral." Tom overheard and texted Harrison, "They're going to humiliate him in front of everyone." Nathan polished glasses mechanically, his mind at the hospital. His phone showed a missed call from the scholarship office. Harrison's secretary burst in. "Sir, Patricia's preparing to release something about Vietnam." "Let her," Harrison said calmly. James Foster's heroism that day is well documented. Evening approached. Employees began arriving in party clothes. Nathan changed into his serving uniform, his leg aching from stress. Patricia, already starting on the champagne, watched him with predatory eyes. "Ready for your big moment, Foster?" Sarah clutched her phone with all its recorded evidence. Tom guarded his documents. Harrison stood ready in his office. The stage was set. In hours, everything would change at Riverside Tower. But first, Nathan had to face his greatest humiliation, or what Patricia planned to be his greatest humiliation. None of them knew that Harrison had already called in a few old military friends. The truth about Vietnam wasn't what Patricia thought. The storm was about to break. The annual party pulsed with energy as Nathan navigated through the crowd with his tray of champagne. His leg protested each step, but he kept his focus on the glasses, determined not to give Patricia any ammunition. "Look, everyone," Patricia's voice carried across the room, already slurred from pre-party drinks. "Our entertainment for the evening is serving drinks." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Patricia had positioned her phone to record, and several of her allies did the same. "Nathan," she called out, "bring champagne to the executive table. Let's see how well you can manage that." Sarah watched from near the buffet, her own phone recording everything. Tom stood near the emergency exit, clutching his documented evidence. "Careful now," Patricia taunted as Nathan approached their table. "These glasses cost more than your monthly salary." Nathan took another step. His leg hit something, a foot deliberately stuck out in his path. Time slowed as he started to fall. Suddenly, a firm hand gripped his elbow, stabilizing him. The mysterious consultant, Mr. Thompson, had appeared from nowhere. "Ladies and gentlemen," a strong voice cut through the murmur, "I believe it's time for some truth." The crowd turned. Robert Harrison III stood at the podium, no longer in his consultant disguise, a projector screen lowered behind him. "First, let's watch some interesting security footage." Patricia's face drained of color. "You can't." The screen flickered to life, showing clips of Patricia's systematic harassment. Nathan setting up the morning coffee, Patricia deliberately spilling it, the group chat messages, the financial records being altered. "Mr. Harrison," Patricia stumbled forward, "those videos are taken out of context. And what about your actions in Vietnam? The public would be very interested." "You mean the day James Foster saved my unit?" Harrison's voice was steel. "The day your research failed to uncover was documented by the Pentagon. James Foster received the Silver Star for his actions. His son carries the same courage." The room fell silent. Nathan stared at Harrison, pieces clicking into place. "Nathan's father saved my life in Vietnam," Harrison continued. "His mother was a combat nurse, and his grandmother, Margaret Foster, helped me learn to walk again with this prosthetic leg." He pulled up his pant leg, revealing the military-grade prosthetic. Gasps filled the room. But today isn't about the past, it's about the present. Harrison clicked to the next slide. "Patricia Reynolds, you're fired. So are your primary conspirators. The evidence of your financial misconduct has been forwarded to the authorities." Patricia lunged for the exit, but found 2 security guards waiting. "As for Nathan Foster," Harrison's voice softened. His perfect GPA while working full-time and caring for his grandmother speaks volumes. Starting Monday, he's our new Director of Human Resources. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Harrison raised his hand. But there's more. I'm announcing the creation of the Margaret Foster Foundation, providing medical care for all our employees and their families. Nathan's grandmother will be its first beneficiary. Nathan's phone buzzed. A video call from the hospital. Mrs. Chen's tearful face appeared. Nathan, your grandmother is watching everything. The hospital staff set up a stream. The phone was passed to Margaret, who smiled weakly from her bed. I'm so proud of you, my boy. Patricia's voice cut through the moment. This is ridiculous. A janitor can't. A janitor who earned a 4.0 GPA while being tormented by his superiors? Harrison interrupted. Who never lost his dignity or faith, who embodies everything this company should stand for. Security began escorting Patricia and her inner circle out. Sarah stepped forward, handing over her phone with the recordings. Tom approached with his documents. One last thing, Harrison said. Next week, the FBI will interview all employees about the financial irregularities under Ms. Reynolds' supervision. Full immunity for anyone who comes forward voluntarily. Nathan stood stunned as people began approaching him, some apologizing, others offering congratulations. His phone still showed his grandmother's proud face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Son, Harrison said quietly, placing a hand on Nathan's shoulder. Your father saved my life. Tonight, I finally repay that debt. The party continued, but everything had changed at Riverside Tower. As Patricia was led out in handcuffs, she caught one last glimpse of Nathan, standing tall despite his limp, accepting congratulations from the same people who had mocked him hours before. Justice had finally arrived at the 15th floor. The party crowd gathered around Harrison as he pulled out an old military photograph. March 15, 1970. Harrison began. Our unit was pinned down outside Saigon. James Foster, Nathan's father, had a clear path to safety. Instead, he came back for me. The room fell silent as Harrison continued. The mortar that took my leg should have killed me. James dragged me 2 miles to the medical station. That's where I met Sarah Foster, Nathan's mother, a combat nurse. And later, during my rehabilitation, Margaret Foster taught me to walk again. Nathan gripped his cane, hearing about his parents' bravery for the first time. Patricia thought she'd found dirt on my war record. Harrison smiled grimly. What she found was a classified report of James Foster's Silver Star recommendation. Security officers were still leading Patricia's associates out. Several began crying, offering to cooperate with investigators. Nathan, Harrison turned. Your father never sought recognition. He simply did what was right. You're exactly like him. Sarah from accounting stepped forward. Mr. Harrison, I have recordings of every meeting where Patricia planned her harassment. Me too, Tom added, and documents showing how she forced employees to help hide financial discrepancies. More employees began coming forward, sharing stories of Patricia's abuse of power. I was fired last year for questioning missing funds, a former employee spoke up from the crowd. She threatened to blacklist me if I talked. Harrison nodded to his lawyers, who began taking statements. Nathan's phone buzzed again. The hospital. Mr. Foster, we've received authorization from the Margaret Foster Foundation. Your grandmother's surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The foundation isn't just for show, Harrison announced to the room. Starting immediately, all employees have full medical coverage. No more choosing between healthcare and rent. Several people burst into tears. One janitor admitted skipping chemotherapy to pay his daughter's college tuition. As for the harassment, Harrison continued, this company will implement a zero-tolerance policy. Nathan's first task as HR director is creating a comprehensive anti-discrimination program. Patricia, still in handcuffs, screamed from the doorway. You can't give a janitor that much power. He'll destroy everything. Actually, Nathan's professor stepped forward. Harrison had invited him. Mr. Foster's thesis on corporate ethics and inclusive workplace policies won our department's highest honors. Harrison smiled. Which brings me to the next announcement. Nathan's program will be implemented across all our locations nationwide. The room buzzed with excitement. Longtime employees whispered about how different this was from Patricia's reign of terror. Sir, Nathan finally spoke. I don't know how to thank you. Thank your father, Harrison replied. and your mother and your grandmother. They showed me what real courage looks like." More former employees arrived. Harrison had invited everyone Patricia had forced out. They shared stories of her systematic discrimination and financial manipulation. "The FBI will handle the financial crimes," Harrison announced. "But today, we're focused on healing. Every employee terminated under Patricia's leadership will be offered reinstatement with back pay." Nathan's phone lit up with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Margaret is crying happy tears. The nurses are celebrating with her." The night continued with more revelations. Patricia had diverted charitable donations, manipulated performance reviews, and created a culture of fear that had cost the company its best talent. "Monday morning," Harrison concluded, "we begin a new chapter. Nathan, your office on the 15th floor is ready. Your grandmother's surgery is covered. Your student loans are cleared. Now show us the leader I know you can be." As the party wound down, employees kept approaching Nathan, some apologizing, others offering support. The janitors gathered around him, proud that one of their own had risen so high. "Your father carried me to safety," Harrison said quietly to Nathan. "You'll help carry this company to a better future." Outside in the police car, Patricia watched her empire crumble. Her phone buzzed with messages from former associates scrambling to make deals with investigators. The night of revelations had changed everything at Riverside Tower. But for Nathan, the real work was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with Nathan standing in his new office on the 15th floor. His grandmother's surgery had been successful, and for the first time in years, she was receiving proper care. "Mr. Foster?" Sarah knocked on his door. "Your 9 o'clock meeting with the board is starting." Nathan grabbed his cane and headed to the conference room. Several board members sat waiting, their expressions skeptical. "Mr. Foster," Richard Wilson, a senior board member, began. "While we respect Mr. Harrison's unique decisions, we have concerns about your experience level." With all due respect, Nathan opened his laptop. "I've prepared a detailed presentation on our new workplace inclusion initiative." In the hospital, Margaret watched the morning news coverage of Patricia's arrest. The financial fraud charges were making headlines. "Your grandson is doing great things," her nurse smiled, adjusting her IV. Back at Riverside Tower, Nathan faced his first crisis. A group of middle managers filed a formal complaint about his appointment. "They're saying it sets a dangerous precedent," Sarah reported. "Some are threatening to resign." "Let them," Harrison said from the doorway. "Change isn't easy. Show them why I chose you." Nathan called an all-staff meeting. As employees filed in, he noticed the division, some supportive, others openly hostile. "I was your janitor last week," he began. "I saw how this company operated from the ground up. Today, I'm sharing my plan to fix what's broken." His presentation silenced the critics. Months of late-night studying had prepared him for this moment. "Impressive," Wilson admitted afterward. "But can you handle the practical challenges?" Nathan's answer came sooner than expected. A major client called, threatening to leave after hearing about Patricia's crimes. "Put them on speaker," Harrison suggested. Nathan spoke with confidence, outlining the company's new direction. By the end of the call, the client had doubled their contract. In another part of town, Patricia sat in jail, watching her influence crumble. Former allies were testifying against her. "Your lawyer's here," a guard announced. "Tell them I'm ready to talk," Patricia replied. Her empire was gone. All she had left was a plea deal. At the hospital, Margaret received more good news. The treatment was working better than expected. "God answers prayers," she told Mrs. Chen, who visited daily. Nathan faced his next challenge that afternoon. The janitorial staff, his former colleagues, needed a new supervisor. "Promote from within," he decided, choosing Mike, a veteran with 20 years' experience. "But he has a disability," someone objected. "Exactly why he understands the importance of fair treatment," Nathan replied. Harrison watched proudly as Nathan navigated his first week. The young man's intelligence and compassion were transforming the workplace. "Sir," his secretary interrupted. "The press is requesting interviews about the changes at Riverside Tower." "Direct them to Nathan," Harrison smiled. "It's his story to tell." By Friday, the mood had shifted. Even the skeptical board members acknowledged the positive changes. Employee morale improved dramatically. "Mr. Foster?" Sarah poked her head in. The reinstated employees are here for orientation. Nathan greeted his new team members, including some who had once mocked him. Their discomfort was obvious. Everyone deserves a second chance, he told them, just like I got one. The day ended with unexpected news. Patricia had accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify about corporate corruption in exchange for a reduced sentence. She'll be working at a fast food restaurant after this. Sarah commented, "Everyone has to start somewhere." Nathan replied, remembering his own journey. Harrison stopped by Nathan's office one last time that day. "Your father would be proud. You've accomplished more in a week than most do in a year." Nathan looked out over the city. His grandmother was healing, his career was soaring, and his dream of making a difference was becoming reality. But bigger challenges lay ahead. The company's national expansion would test his leadership in ways he couldn't imagine. For now, though, he had proved something important. Character and determination matter more than physical limitations or social status. The winds of change were blowing through Riverside Tower, and Nathan Foster was leading the way. 3 months later, Nathan stood at the podium of Riverside Tower's main conference center. Behind him, a banner read, "National Corporate Inclusion Program Launch." "When I started here as a janitor," he began, "I couldn't imagine this moment. Today, we're launching a program that will change thousands of lives." Margaret sat in the front row, her color restored after successful treatment. Beside her, Harrison nodded encouragingly. "Our pilot program has already hired 50 employees with disabilities across 10 states, Nathan continued. Their performance ratings are 20% above average. The audience included CEOs from major corporations, all interested in implementing similar programs. "The numbers don't lie," Nathan clicked to his next slide. "Productivity is up. Turnover is down. Employee satisfaction has doubled." In the back of the room, a familiar face appeared. Patricia, recently released and working at a fast food restaurant, had come to witness the changes. "Ms. Reynolds," Nathan acknowledged her. "Your story helped us identify what needed to change. Thank you for that lesson." Patricia's eyes filled with tears as she quietly left the room. "Now," Nathan continued, "I'd like to introduce our first success story. Mike Johnson, our new head of facility management." Mike, the veteran janitor Nathan had promoted, wheeled himself to the stage. "3 months ago, I was just another disabled veteran mopping floors," Mike spoke. "Today, I manage 60 people across 3 buildings." The presentation continued with more success stories. Sarah, now Nathan's executive assistant, managed the growing list of corporations wanting to participate. "Mr. Foster," a reporter called out, "how does it feel going from janitor to national program director in 3 months?" "The same way it felt being a janitor. I'm here to serve others." After the presentation, Harrison made an unexpected announcement. "The board has unanimously voted to name Nathan Foster as our next CEO." The room erupted in applause. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. "There's more," Harrison continued. "Nathan's old corner store, the one his grandmother sold to raise him, has been purchased by the company." Margaret gasped as Harrison explained. "It's being converted into a community center, offering job training for people with disabilities." Nathan's phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues across the country. His program was already being implemented in over 50 companies. "Your father dragged me to safety in Vietnam," Harrison told the crowd. His son is dragging corporate America into a new era of inclusion. Later that day, Nathan visited his grandmother's old store. Construction workers were transforming it into the Margaret Foster Community Center. "From $20 in my pocket to this," Margaret whispered, touching the new sign. "The American dream is real." A group of disabled veterans arrived for their job training orientation. Among them was a young woman using a cane similar to Nathan's. "Will we really have a chance?" she asked. "Look at me," Nathan replied. "In America, anything is possible if you work hard and keep faith." Patricia watched from across the street, wearing her fast food uniform. She had learned her lesson the hard way. "Mr. Foster," she called out as he left the center. "I'm sorry for everything." "Want to help with our job training program?" he offered. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Back at Riverside Tower, Harrison watched the evening news coverage of the program launch. "Nathan's exceeded every expectation," Sarah commented. "No," Harrison smiled, "he's exactly who I knew he would be." His father would be proud. The day ended with Nathan back in his office, looking at an old photo of his parents in their military uniforms. "We did it, Mom and Dad," he whispered. "We showed them what a foster can do." Outside his window, the sun set on a changed riverside tower, a symbol of what could happen when someone chose hope over hatred, perseverance over prejudice. The American dream was alive and well, proving that sometimes the longest journey began with a simple act of kindness, a helping hand, and an unshakable faith in possibility. 6 months into Nathan's leadership, opposition emerged from an unexpected source. A group of senior directors, led by James Maxwell from the Chicago office, challenged his authority. "The board has concerns," Maxwell announced during a video conference. "Our traditional clients are nervous about these rapid changes." Nathan sat in his office, Harrison beside him, as Maxwell listed complaints. The inclusion program was too expensive. The new policies were disrupting established practices, and frankly, Maxwell concluded, some clients question having a former janitor as CEO. Before Nathan could respond, crisis struck. The company's stock dropped 15% after Maxwell's group leaked concerns to the press. "They're trying to force you out," Sarah warned, bringing in the morning papers. Headlines questioned Nathan's qualifications. Harrison watched Nathan carefully. "How will you handle this?" "The same way I handled Patricia," Nathan replied, reaching for his phone. "With truth." He called an emergency board meeting. As directors filed in, many avoided eye contact. "Mr. Maxwell," Nathan began, "you claim our inclusion program is too expensive. Here are the numbers." His presentation was devastating. Productivity up 30%, turnover down 60%. Employee healthcare costs reduced by millions thanks to preventive care. "But what about our image?" Maxwell protested. Nathan clicked to the next slide. "Our market share has increased in every sector. Client satisfaction is at record levels." The room fell silent as Nathan revealed more data. Companies implementing his program reported similar success. "Now," Nathan turned to Maxwell, "let's discuss the real issue. Your resistance to change." Sarah distributed folders containing evidence of Maxwell's own discriminatory practices. Qualified candidates rejected. Complaints buried. Promotions denied based on disability status. "This stops today," Nathan declared. "Either adapt to our new culture or find another company." Maxwell stood to leave. "You're making a mistake. Our biggest client." "Just doubled their contract," Harrison interrupted, "specifically because of our inclusion program." Across town, Margaret was teaching a business class at her old store, now a thriving community center. "Success isn't about where you start," she told her students, many using canes or wheelchairs. "It's about how hard you work to reach your goals." Back at Riverside Tower, Maxwell's group faced a choice. 5 directors resigned. The others pledged to support the new direction. "Your father faced similar resistance in Vietnam," Harrison told Nathan later. "People questioned his judgment when he came back for me." Nathan's phone buzzed. Another crisis. A competitor was spreading rumors about the company's stability. "They're saying we're too focused on social issues," Sarah reported. "Some investors are getting nervous." Nathan called a press conference. As cameras rolled, he didn't hide his limp or his cane. "Look around this room," he told reporters. "Every person here has value. Every person deserves a chance. That's not just good ethics, it's good business." The market responded. By day's end, the stock had recovered and surpassed its previous high. Mr. Foster, a young employee in a wheelchair, stopped him after the conference. "Thank you for showing us what's possible." Patricia, still working her fast food job, watched the press conference on TV. She'd started volunteering at the community center, finding redemption and helping others. "You proved me wrong," she told Nathan during her volunteer shift. "About everything." Maxwell made one final attempt to undermine Nathan, claiming financial irregularities similar to Patricia's crimes. "The difference," Nathan told the board, "is that every transaction under my leadership is transparent. Every decision documented, every policy fair." The evidence backed him completely. Maxwell resigned that afternoon. Harrison watched it all with pride. "You didn't just survive their attacks, you showed them a better way." Nathan ended the day visiting his old maintenance office. The new janitor, a veteran amputee, was mopping floors. "Keep working hard," Nathan told him. "In this company, anyone can rise to the top." The American dream was alive at Riverside Tower, proving that the greatest victories often came from the fiercest battles. And Nathan Foster, the limping janitor who became CEO, had shown that true leadership wasn't about how you walked, but how you led others forward. 1 year after Nathan's rise from janitor to CEO, Riverside Tower hosted its largest event ever, the National Corporate Leadership Summit on Workplace Inclusion. Nathan stood at the podium, his gold-plated cane gleaming under the lights. 2,000 executives filled the conference hall, eager to learn from the company that had revolutionized corporate culture. "My story begins with $20, Nathan started. That's all my grandmother had when she came to America. Today, I want to tell you what happened to that $20. The audience leaned forward as Nathan pointed to Margaret in the front row. "My grandmother turned $20 into a corner store. She turned that store into a future for her family. And when my parents died, she turned that future into a promise that in America, anyone could succeed if they worked hard enough." Screens behind him showed photos. Margaret arriving in America, his parents in military uniform, Nathan as a young janitor. "But this isn't just my story," he continued. "It's the story of Mike, our facility manager, who went from mopping floors to managing 3 buildings. It's the story of Sarah, who stood up against discrimination and now runs our executive office." Sarah, sitting beside Margaret, wiped tears from her eyes. "It's even the story of Patricia Reynolds," Nathan gestured to the back, where Patricia stood in her fast food uniform, "who learned that true leadership isn't about power over others, but empowering others." Harrison took the stage next, walking deliberately to show his prosthetic leg. "1 year ago, we started a revolution in corporate America," he announced. "Today, over 500 companies have adopted our inclusion program. More than 10,000 people with disabilities have found meaningful employment. But numbers don't tell the whole story." The screens showed transformation stories: veterans with prosthetic limbs working as executives, people with various disabilities succeeding in multiple roles, the Margaret Foster Community Center changing lives. "Our stock price has tripled," Harrison continued. "Our productivity leads the industry. Our employee satisfaction ranks highest nationwide, but that's not why we're here." Nathan returned to the podium. "We're here because every person deserves dignity. Every worker deserves respect. Every dream deserves a chance." The announcement that followed stunned the audience. Riverside Tower was expanding its program internationally. The Margaret Foster Foundation would open centers in 50 cities. "But the biggest announcement," Harrison smiled, "is about leadership. As of today, I'm officially retiring. Nathan Foster is your new CEO." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Margaret couldn't stop crying as Nathan accepted the company leadership. "I have one final announcement," Nathan said. "Starting today, every janitor, every maintenance worker, every person at every level of this company will have access to education benefits, healthcare, and advancement opportunities. No one will ever have to choose between caring for family and pursuing dreams." From her seat, Patricia nodded in understanding. She'd learned this lesson the hard way, but was now part of the solution, managing job training at the community center. "America isn't just a place," Nathan concluded. "It's a promise. A promise that hard work matters more than circumstances, that character counts more than conditions, that faith and perseverance can overcome any obstacle." The day ended with a special ceremony. Every employee who had faced discrimination under the old regime received a formal apology and compensation. Patricia stood with them, now helping others avoid her past mistakes. "Your father would be proud." Harrison told Nathan afterward, "He saved 1 life in Vietnam. You're saving thousands." At the Margaret Foster Community Center, a new class of students began their training. Among them was Maxwell, the former director who had opposed Nathan. After losing everything, he had found new purpose helping others rise. "Success isn't measured by how high you climb," Nathan told the class. "It's measured by how many people you bring up with you." The evening ended with a quiet moment in Nathan's old maintenance office. The janitor's cart still stood where he used to leave it. "From janitor to CEO," Margaret said softly, standing beside him. "All because you never gave up." "No, Grandma," Nathan replied. "All because you taught me the true value of that $20. It's not what you have, but what you do with it that matters." Outside, the sun set on Riverside Tower, now a symbol of the American dream's enduring promise. The building where a limping janitor had once faced mockery now stood as a beacon of hope, proving that the greatest journeys often begin with the smallest steps. Nathan's gold-plated cane, a gift from Harrison, caught the last rays of sunlight. It was no longer a symbol of limitation, but a reminder that every obstacle overcome made the path easier for those who followed. The American dream was alive and well at Riverside Tower, where a grandmother's $20 had grown into a legacy of hope, where faith had overcome fear, and where the simple act of treating people with dignity had transformed not just a company, but countless lives. As Nathan and Margaret walked out together, they passed the Wall of Honor, now displaying his parents' military photos alongside the company's new mission statement. Success is measured not by how you walk, but by how many people you help reach their dreams. The story of Nathan Foster, the limping janitor who became CEO, would inspire generations. But more importantly, it would remind everyone that in America, with faith, hard work, and perseverance, anything was possible. The dream that had started with $20 had become priceless. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs inspiration today. What challenges have you overcome in your own life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us that faith, perseverance, and kindness can overcome any obstacle. Remember, success isn't about how far you can walk, but how many people you can help stand up along the way.